So whenever a university wants to do some research, of course, they invite people to do research, right? And it's always interesting to see whenever they touch upon the topic of the metronome, certainly in our time, to see, to learn how universities from their academic standpoint, and I don't want to diminish the value of universities, don't quote me wrong, it's not even musicology in general. What I'm saying here is that in this specific domain of tempo research, as part of the musicology department, which by definition cannot be a kind of science, like, physics is a science, so I don't have to digress on this. But that in that specific domain, whenever a university touches upon the metronome, well, it's always interesting how they deal with that. And we have covered and will cover more the work of Dr. Martin Noordijn, who takes some, at the minimum, you can say questionable approaches, but for some universities, that's not a problem to even have him grant him the promotion as a doctor or publish whatever article he wants to publish now, for instance, in early music Oxford Journal. I would happy to be on the peer review board there, and I can guarantee you that the questions I would ask the applicant for the publication to be answered, that he cannot answer them. It's sometimes, if it wasn't serious in the sense that if we care about reconstructing tempo indication, and if we consider that to be serious, the intention of the composer, if it wasn't serious for us, like tempo junkies, if I can call us like that, then you would sit back and just laugh with it, because sometimes it's flat out painful to watch, actually. But apparently in the Oxford University Press, and I should have known that, they have a new, and not actually a new, they have, there is a new star rising at the horizon, which in the person of Alexander Bonus. I don't want to be skeptical here or sarcastic or ironic, but I'm going to show you some video clips by this assistant professor. I'm reading actually from his bio. And I wouldn't take this person or this research, I don't know if you can call someone like, we're going to do that, research. As you can hear, I'm really struggling finding the right words to describe the work that he is about to do, because what happens now is that he is currently here writing an entry on metronome, musical clock, and mobile phone. Okay, it's just new for me. So forthcoming publications include entries on the metronome, musical clock, and mobile phone for the New Grove Dictionary of Musical Instruments, as well as the Handbook of the Metronome for Oxford Music Online. It cannot get any better than this, right? So we might expect, at the bare minimum, that what Mr. Bonus is about to present us gives us the full history of the metronome, presents us all the problems that are connected to the metronome box, the metronome numbers, as, for instance, we struggle for over a century to solve them. So if universities really cared about the truth, then we can bet our hopes and we can put our money where that of Alexander Bonus is, because we can be sure that Oxford, and certainly the New Grove Dictionary, that's an institute, will not call upon the work or the study of Alexander Bonus when his work would not represent the objective truth, the neutral facts. So I said a few minutes ago that I should have known this, because the work of Alexander Bonus is in the Dropbox folder that, by the way, you as a patron have access to, and it's there since quite a while. I never checked it. Shame on me. Apparently, I wasn't expecting much truth to come from that. And I was right in a sense. In this segment, I'm not going to talk about his writings. He is actually summarizing that himself in a few clips on the website of Oxford University Press, but also in a recent colloquium on tempo. Surprisingly, of course, or not, I wasn't there, I wasn't asked even. But doesn't matter. It's very interesting to see what the guy has to say about his work on the metronome, or metronome in general. And you as an audience that should have been trained by now to smell any deflection from miles or kilometers distance, you should immediately sit back and smile at how this guy, remember, preparing his entry in the New Grove Dictionary of Musical Instruments. I mean, that's a standard work that people will go to search for objective and neutral information. And guys, we're talking about metronome marks. One can have an opinion about short and long appoggiaturas, or this aspect of performance practice, or that aspect of performance practice. But on metronome marks, you cannot have an opinion. That's just the frequency per minute. You sit at the piano, you play. If it's not possible, you have a problem. And the least universities should do in an encyclopedia or in Oxford Music Online, which is basically the same, is present the reader with the problem that needs to be solved. But of course, I get it. Those universities, they have a system, a peer-reviewed system, and they work together. And of course, it's a self-regulating system. Yeah, we see that. So Mr. Bonus apparently got his degree just like Martin Noortuin did once on a doctoral thesis that when you dive into that, you can only wonder how it's possible that such a work with a zillion red flags, I would say, got passed through a jury board with names like Clive Brown. Anyways, that's for another time. But here the same thing. I get that universities look in their database and say, oh, we have Mr. Alexander Bonus, probably Dr. Bonus, I'm reading from my screen. And so, yeah, his title is probably well-deserved. I have no idea. And so, yes, why not ask him to write something for the New Grove Dictionary of Musical Instruments? It will be like neutral, objective, and factual, and it will represent all the narrative and all the writings and authors and publications that are there. So that the reader, when they go to the New Grove Dictionary of Musical Instruments or Oxford Music Online, that they get the state-of-the-art information that will lead them to new research or to formulate or to just research on their own. It's a starting point. You would expect that. Well, let's see. I give you first the entry or the contribution of Mr. Bonus to that research colloquium. And again, guys, this is a long introduction. I know. You have been trained again to smell that deflective nature. When someone doesn't have an answer, and in the world of metronome marks, where a single beat perspective is taken as a default by any scholar and researcher, he or she doesn't have a choice even. And in many cases, they haven't even a clue of a different existence. They start thinking and like, okay, of course they see the problem. Of course they see the problem. I mean, who can be so stupid not to see that the metronome mark representing 15 plus notes a second going to 25 notes a second, sometimes even for short runs to 30 notes a second, and don't say that's a proof against whole beat, because that would be a double proof against single beat. But you can play 50 notes a second. I will make a video of that. I've made that statement already in the past. Very short runs, like 1 octave. It's very exceptional, by the way, but you can do that. You cannot do it like continuously. 15 notes a second is like not possible for continuous playing. And then if it were 16 notes a second is there, 17, 18, 19, 20. But if you are gonna be Mr. Metronome, I mean Oxford University Press, you know the problem. And so you expect when you're invited as an expert on the matter for an international colloquium on historical tempi, that the first thing you're going to do is say, guys, we have here a metronome, and I have to say something about it. We have a problem. What is the problem we have to solve? What is it that this metronome represented? What is a metronome mark, actually? What did it mean for Beethoven? You might want to give some quotes because the guy left some quotes. What did it mean for all the others of his? Can we debate upon the accuracy of the metronome mark, about the exactness of metronome mark or not? That should be the starting point. About what else would you talk when you give a lecture on the metronome mark than to solve the mystery? Listen what this answer is.
Thank you very much. Please let me know again if the sound is not great. I'd like to reiterate some things from my last talk because apparently some folks couldn't hear me. As a summation, I will say that whenever we use a modern metronome, we are speculating upon the tempo and quality of tempo of the past, and especially the pre-industrial past. We need to make sure to recognize that just because an invention exists, it doesn't necessarily mean it was applicable.
So whenever we use a metronome, he says modern metronome, but I'm sorry, there is only one type of metronome. That's the device that gives you the frequency per minute or converts a metronome mark into a frequency per minute. We are speculating upon the quality of the tempo. Why would you listen any further to someone like him? Whenever you use a metronome and you use an historical metronome mark, you are speculating about the quality of the metronome mark. We do not speculate about the quality of the metronome marks by Beethoven, don't we? Is that something you're going to write in Oxford University Press or Oxford Music Online or Grove Dictionary? Guys, when you take a metronome and you put Beethoven metronome marks data into your app or you have a real metronome, be aware you're speculating about the quality of the given metronome mark. Beethoven entering the room or there logs in on from heaven to that Zoom call and say, what did you say about my metronome marks? Wait for them. Our world needs them. We cannot live without them anymore because we don't have tempi ordinario anymore like we used to have. I heard that my choral symphony in Berlin had success, and that's thanks to my metronome marks. But whenever we use them today, Mr. Bonus said you have to be aware that you're speculating about the quality of the metronome marks. He continues, I can share that with you, and maybe I will, but I'm going to share you first his other fragments, which are just too good not to share. But in this segment, he makes this point, which he also does in his articles, like these guys were inventing something and the world was not ready for them. So his point, and you will see that in the exact first fragment that I'm going to show entirely, it's just a few minutes. His point being, the metronome was like so new as an invention. So if you come across some metronome marks, you should check the quality of them. Why? Because those people, they were presented with something that was developed in seclusion, you know, and suddenly it came there and like, yeah, how can you expect the society to embrace that and know how to use it? Sometimes, guys, I'm puzzled by the genius explanations these guys find. Like, we don't have an explanation for the metronome mark. We're not going to say that Beethoven was an idiot, but doubt the accuracy of the metronome marks. I mean, the guy could compose a 9th symphony, but didn't know how to use a metronome. his entire life since the thing was invented, and nobody in his entire entourage said anything about it. And no, they continue to misuse the device like Beethoven did, because Czerny and Moscheles and all the others, they gave metronome marks just like Beethoven. So they had these Zoom call meetings in 1820 where they said, guys, we all admire our friend Ludwig, but yeah, this composer, I mean, what are we going to do with his metronome marks? And the guy is serious about them, you know. I called him, Czerny would say, like, listen, Ludwig, maybe you want to change your mind because, you know, we are not comfortable with that. How can we defend that? What will future generations say about your metronome marks? There will be a Mr. Bonus saying, like, listen, you have to question the applicability of the metronome marks, and not even that, the quality. I mean, Ludwig, don't do it. And Ludwig would answer like, yeah, of course, whatever. And so they had these Zoom meetings. Czerny with Moscheles, with Ferdinand Ries, young Liszt was there. And they say, guys, and Liszt said, wait, I have Bülow here. He wants to make editions of Beethoven as well. Oh, Czerny said, then I invite Kulak, and Kulak invite Köhler, and all these people gathering in the 19th century Zoom meeting saying like, What shall we do? Listen, we're going to use the metronome like Beethoven because, yeah, we know he made mistakes, but I mean, we cannot expose the master, you know? The poor guy. And so they all used the metronome like him, knowing it was wrong. I mean, come on, I'm ridiculizing, of course, but it's just a consequence of what he is saying, huh? But now comes the point. 18 minutes in the video. The point is really just too good not to show. I will let the clip play. And again, use your trained brains, guys. Deflection is all what you should. You have to put yourself in the position. A single beat explanation, which all these researchers have to take by default. Don't think they have an option to go like sideways and say like, we are going to insert some alternative solutions. It's not possible. Again, I will make a video on Thomas S. Kuhn. It was Thomas S. Kuhn, actually. It was a suggestion of one of my viewers, and it was a great one. Why it always are the outsiders who make the paradigm shifts in scientific revolutions. And yes, that's what we are, and yes, that's what we are doing, but that's for another time. But they don't have an option, eh? Mr. Bonus cannot say tomorrow, listen, people of Oxford Music Online and Grove and Oxford University Press, I have a serious conversation with you to be held because, you know, my research actually showed that these metronome marks are impossible in the way we read them today, and I would like to propose you something new. Do you know the work of Lorenz Gradient? I would like to make an article on this. You really think he has the possibility to do that? Hell no! Hell no! Even if we want, it's like Alberto often says, like they build golden cages and they're so happy. But they have no escape. They have no escape. How would a teacher, and I'm completely digressing now, how would a teacher in a conservatory that intellectually supports what we are doing, how would he or she has a possibility to just say to the student like, listen, I would like you to experiment with this? That should be the nature of universities. Learn students to think critically, but once you're in the system, it's like Thomas Kuhn says, you're puzzle solvers, you work with what the system provides you to work with. Anyways, let's go to his clip here, Oxford University Press.
Just because someone invents a technology doesn't mean it's embraced immediately by a culture. And so we find these proto-metronomes throughout the late 1700s, clockwork devices that are kind of ungainly, that one person invented in seclusion, essentially. And it was an experiment, and experiments in technology happen all the time. Those devices went all the way through 1815, where Johann Meisel really started promoting it. And so it was very much a rudimentary clock, and there are better clocks in homes at the time. It was very expensive, and it was his promotional acumen
that really started the ball running, because he, like any good promoter, finds the most famous musicians to promote a device they don't really know that much about. We can see the same thing with commercials today. But what my research actually shows, it's not the technology that makes things better, easier, or more understandable. It's really a societal shift. And that societal shift happens in what we dub the machine age, basically 1910 to 1920. That is when society is finally embracing on a wide scale all sorts of automated technologies. Cars, trains have been around for a while, conveyor belt systems. This is now the new norm of modern society, and it is in that context that metronomes, even the clockwork, ungainly metronomes, become more popular.
What can I say? I mean, have you listened to what he's saying? I mean, I made some notes here. It's not because the metronome was around that the musical society knew how to use it or embraced it. The metronome, if anything, was an invention that was decades too late. Even in Mozart's time, Quantz was screaming for a device to give accurate tempo. Mersenne in the 17th century took Galileo's pendulum to say, finally we have something to measure time, to make sure that musicians all over the place in this entire globe and in the future would never miss the tempi that the composer had in mind. By the time Melzel came with this metronome, Beethoven was screaming for it. If you would reconstruct Beethoven's life from this perspective, you would see suddenly that Beethoven had lunches with Melzel before the metronome was introduced. So who do you think that Melzel got influence from? The time the metronome came, everybody was dead ready to use it. It was time. There were other devices like pendulums, and they went on to be invented in the entire 19th century because, yes, the metronome was not so cheap. Beethoven actually said, like, we should make a subscription for people who can buy these machines at a very expensive price, so that Melzel, when he covered his cost, can produce it en masse just for everyone to buy. That's how ready this society was. And then Bonus continues to say, like, it took some time, but in the early 20th century, 1910, 1920, this society was finally ready to accept the metronome. The metronome was dead by then. Hated, reduced to a ticking machine that was put next to you on the piano as a device to make you play faster and faster in time. I mean, I could do a research about and show you some quotes by famous treatises of the time saying that forget about the metronome. I don't remember who said it. Forget about the metronome mark. Just play as fast as you can. It's 1910, 1914. I will do that if you want. But how can you possibly develop a view on the history of metronome by saying that the society was not right? We needed a societal shift before the metronome was accepted, and it took 100 years. I mean, again, I don't know if I have to admire something like this. Like, obviously, if you're here for a longer time, you smell the deflection from kilometers. I mean, what happened here, of course, is very simple. The question, how am I going to explain the unexplainable? And when Noortuin in 2013, in the article on Czerny's Impossible Metronome Marks, the quotes are from him, says, like, listen, as the end conclusion, We cannot play it. You cannot play it. You cannot play it on a modern piano. You cannot play it on a period instrument. You cannot play it. Period. And how did he answer the question why Czerny gave those metronome marks? We have to accept that guy could do it. You think I'm kidding? Just look for my video on him. I will make another one on that article. It's just too good. Just too good. Peer reviewed. Czerny had a different muscular and nerve system than anyone else in that time, and certainly than ours. Well, how about just adding a doctor in your peer review system? And here, the deflection is like, yeah, these metronome marks are impossible, but I'm about to write an article for the New Grove Dictionary and for Oxford Music Online, so I have to give an explanation. And of course, single beat is the only default. The society wasn't ready. You have this lonely Melzel, and he's there sitting in the corner of his little room like a genius. We forget that he was like Hof instrument maker or whatever. I don't know the term in English. He had a very important position, but he was sitting there, and then suddenly he had these ticking devices over there. And of course, yeah, there were clocks in homes that were better. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I can. In Versailles, we had clocks that were a little bit more sophisticated, but they had also little puppets that were walking around. More precise than that Melzel patent you won't get. It's with a precision that's almost digital. But yeah, he was there working on this clock, and suddenly he had something. And then, oh, he was a good businessman. He took his phone, he called to Beethoven and said, I have something. Do you want to promote it? Mr. Salieri, you too? Mr. Kramer, I have something. I'm traveling around the world and see all the musicians, all the composers. I wonder how much money he gave to Beethoven and to Salieri and all the rest to promote that machine. Because they didn't know what to do with it. It was new. Suddenly the metronome was there. It needed a societal shift. Like the trains, when the first train were coming through the landscapes, you know, the cows were giving sour milk and all of that. It took a societal shift before the peasants actually accepted that the trains didn't harm their cows. And so the first composers, they had no idea. And look, there's a solution. There's a solution. They just didn't know how to use the metronome mark. The metronome. They didn't know how to give metronome marks. So how surprising is it that metronome marks don't make any sense? We have to go to 1920, exactly when the final shift happened from whole beat to single beat. And look, there we see metronome marks. That makes sense. So finally, after 1 century, society developed a vision of how to use metronome marks. It's unseen that a scholar on the metronome, I should say, completely undermines his entire field of expertise, quote unquote. Forget about the 19th century. The society wasn't ready for it. It gets even worse, huh?
Until the present state of my research, there hasn't been a lot of context. I haven't heard about the relationship of technology to the music of Brahms, for instance, or the metronome technology in relation to Stravinsky. And once we understand the context, Stravinsky's music in its time, clockwork culture in that time, versus the time of Brahms, versus the time of Mahler, versus the time of Beethoven, versus the time of Monteverdi, then we get a larger sense of what musicality and the metronome do for one another. And it's not about agreeing on one right way or one wrong way. It's all about the historical context. And I think what my research hopes to show is that we need to start thinking about time, tempo, rhythm, and the metronome in relation to specific context, rather than saying it's all good or it's all bad. It goes beyond good, bad, right, wrong, and it has everything to do with what is the composer intention, what is the actual milieu of that technology in its time. And I think the more we know that, the more we can get to the heart of Beethoven and his use or misuse or confusion in regards to the metronome and metronomic numbers.
Have you heard the last sentence? The more we know about the context, the more we can get into the heart of Beethoven and his use or misuse or confusion in regards to the metronome and metronomic numbers. This is the guy who's going to write an entry in the New Grove Dictionary. This is the guy that is chosen by the academic system to write about the metronome and to influence perhaps generations of students to come who will go to the New Grove Dictionary to read this kind of nonsense. Beethoven's misuse, a guy who cannot help himself, but I mean, it shows, huh? I will not say that probably in the New Grove Dictionary, but it is his mindset. It's not my words. I'm not quoting him. It's his video. It's his fragment. I showed you in its entirety there. Beethoven's use or misuse. If you have a position in your research where you have to acknowledge that the majority of the data that you are going to study is actually wrong, then I have news for you. Probably your vision is wrong. Wim is raising his voice again. But isn't this sick? What is a guy like him doing in this field? Give me a stage with him and I will show you what the research and the state of his research actually means. Nothing. How can you contextualize a metronome mark? Until the present state of my research, this sounds so great, unbelievable. Well, go on YouTube, huh? To make your case a little bit differently, but anyway, there hasn't been a lot of context. Excuse you? There hasn't been a lot of context around the metronome. No, it specifies. I haven't heard about the relationship of technology, the music of Brahms, for instance, or the metronome technology in relation to Stravinsky. The metronome technology. Dude, I'm not interested how the machine works. The only thing that you and I should care about is the frequencies per minute that it gives. And once you know that, the technology disappears. It's tick, 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 tick. And you do something with the ticks. No. I want to know the context. And then he quotes Brahms, the composer who gave the least amount of metronome marks, part of which are the most problematic. What do you think that the context of the machine in relationship to Brahms can show you? What kind of magic trick do you hope will appear from heaven? Brahms opening the clouds saying, my metronome marks of the second piano concerto were only possible to be played by me. Closing the clouds. Is it something like that? I mean, I'm ridiculizing again, but this deserves that, right? Versus the time of Brahms, versus the time of Mahler, versus the time of Beethoven, versus the time of Monteverdi. Oh, metronome Monteverdi's time? I don't think so. A metronome mark is a frequency of ticks per minute. Or a metronome converts the metronome mark into a frequency per minute of ticks. You have two ways to read it. Either you do it as we do today, where every tick represents the note value of the metronome mark, or you go into the pendulum mode, still applied by physicians today. Physicists, I don't never know which of the two is right. It's a full swing. They don't count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They count like 1, 2, 3, like many of you would do in real life. Count the swings of a swing, like real swing, like 1. You count 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. the wings of a bird. Do you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1? Or you 1, 2? I mean, it doesn't matter. You have 2 options. That's it. We refuse option number 2. We stick with our default position that we do not question. In spite of the fact that we are representing the academic system, we are doing research with an a priori position. Because guess what? If we are going to let that go, if we are going to apply the crazy whole beat system, you know what happens? Mr. Gardner will not be so happy. Mr. Zander will not be so happy. And all the other musicians, they want to play fast. And made really a living out of that. Claimed like, we play like Mozart. And Mozart played like this, but not like Mr. Guardian or Mr. Winter said, because that's nonsense. While it's the only solution. There is no technology that you have to position in context. There is no composer that you have to bring in context with another one. Yeah, interesting enough, but not with these metronome marks. The metronome is just meant to avoid all of that. You don't need context. You need a stage with a piano, 200 scores and a metronome, and then you play. And if in 197 cases the metronome mark doesn't work in single beat, and in all 200 cases in whole beat, game over. Any science where the problem is defined, by the way, Mr. Bonus, where is that problem definition of yours? 40 minutes, I'm sorry guys, but this is really important stuff, eh? I'm the conspiracy theorist. I'm the flat earther. But those guys of Oxford University Press can go there. They're just invited in the studio to be filmed, and this word salad like, we have to contextualize the machine. I want to see the machine in context with Brahms, with Beethoven, with Stravinsky, with Mahler, Monteverdi. Do I sound really, really savvy? Like, really? Yeah? Is it good? I mean, it's just laughable. I'm sorry. I never know if these people are serious about what they say or they know they just pronounce nonsense. A metronome mark are ticks per minute. Single beat, whole beat. That's it. What works, what doesn't work. When something doesn't work, again, think about a scientific project like doctors or mathematicians. It doesn't matter. And they come to the table after years of study and you say, listen, we have 2 options here. Only 2 are possible. The entire room will stand and applause like, great, unbelievable research. And then they go further and they say, one of those options that theoretically would be possible doesn't work in 80% of the cases. But the other solution works in 100% of the cases. They would end the symposium thanking for those people who did the research, maybe grant them a Nobel Prize. But then our musicology system, tempo research, oh no. We come to the hall and say like, we have 2 options. One solves 100% of the problems. Whoa, get rid of that. We don't want that. And the other one, we retained 80% of the. And then we have to talk about, Melzel and the machine and societal shifts. But you can keep playing that fast as you do. We will make the case for you. And they will say, like, great, get rid of the solution. We want to reinstall the problem. And can you write about it in the Grove Dictionary of Musical Instruments? And while you're doing it, publish the article also on Oxford Music Online and influence the rest of the society, because that's our societal shift. Thank you, Mr. Bonus. I don't think after seeing this segment, Mr. Bonus would like to be with me on stage. But I can promise you, it will be a good show. Really. And I'm sorry when I'm so hard on him, but he took the decision to go there and to write the entry in Grove's Dictionary of Musical Instruments. And he's not capable of doing that because he has not learned to think critically. Or he has, and then it's just biased dishonesty. I cannot think about that in that system. I think they don't see it. They didn't learn to think from from a broad perspective. Anyways, I'm going to close this way too long segment. It's a podcast format segment almost. Guys, what is truly unique is if you're doing research about something, let's say the metronome, what is truly unique is that you actually destroy the topic of your research with a smile on your face. We don't need a metronome. You think I'm kidding? Listen.
In terms of youth pedagogy, I will say, we ought to rethink using clockwork metronomes, digital metronomes at such an early age, saying this is the only right way to perform music, because that colors a young child's view of meter, of rhythm, of pulse, his or her own pulse, his or her own motions. Perhaps we should just teach students how to move first in a kind of their own personal time, rather than impose upon them the most modern machine saying, no, this is the right way. Because honestly, it's not the right way for Mozart. Mozart never learned music with a metronome. So if we're trying to teach our children how to be Mozart, we shouldn't start with that little clock. We should try to find out how Mozart learned music first.
I just wonder if he thought about this Mozart example during the interview or he prepared it. I have no idea, but you see his eyes like twinkle like, oh, now I have it. Mozart didn't have a metronome. Wasn't he a great musician? Shouldn't we teach our children like Mozart and not with a metronome? Guess what Mozart's father was doing when he played the clavichord? Yes, he did. Sorry guys, Mozart played the clavichord. Guess what he did? He took a modern big pen and he said like, lieber Wolfgang, bitte spiele, du spielst nicht im Takt. You don't play a tempo. You don't play in tempo. I mean, if you practice with a metronome or with the teacher ticking, what's the difference? We should learn the kids to move first. I mean, what is this Oxford University Press? Guys, I have to remind you, this guy is invited to talk about the metronome. We have to learn to move the... I mean, don't use a metronome in class. This is not about who's using or misusing, abusing the metronome in class. This is about understanding the metronome in Beethoven's time. What is the meaning of his metronome marks? We have to learn to first move kids like... So you're doing research to something that's your life topic. And the articles he published, I will go over them if you want me. I'll leave it in the comments if you're still here and you mark the time of this now here of this video, and I know you were there. I will go into his publications. It's a little bit more work because I cannot. I mean, this is just too brilliant. I can just 1 minute video. You can hear it for yourself. How did Mozart become a musician? Shouldn't we teach children like Mozart? The question is, how did Mozart learn about time and time division? I mean, his father ticking? Again, go back to Quantz. Quantz was yelling for, he's literally saying like, if there is someone who holds the invention of a machine now back, doesn't publish it, that would give us the correct tempo, not only now, but in all countries and for all people, I urge him to come forward and to publish it because we need it. It's Quantz 1700, if I'm not mistaken, 52, 53, something like that. We should teach our kids like Mozart, like move first. Oxford University. I'm going to write an entry in the Grove Musical Dictionary for Instruments to kill the metronome. Because I'm Mr. Bonus. That's my task. Explain the unexplainable. Listen, I get it. It's like an impossible task. It's really impossible. How are you going to explain from that positions? I'm free. I literally said it a few weeks ago. Here's my fortress. I'm free as a bird. I'm recording Beethoven as I want. I'm releasing discs with LPs, CDs, digital streaming, doesn't matter, just the way I want. If you, of course, in that system, I get it, it's hard. But you have an option, eh? You have an option to just decline the offer to write the New Grove Dictionary's entry. Of course, Mr. Bonus will not decline. What's more important, the truth or my name is there? I leave it to you, and it's up to him to answer. Guys, I might have been a little harder than normal here in this, but I mean, we're talking about an assistant professor who's about to influence generations of musicians. And I have no influence at New Grove Dictionary or Oxford Music Online, but I would like to talk to the people who are in charge. Send them this segment. It's not to cancel anyone, eh? Don't come up with that. This is just not correct. If Mr. Bonus is going to publish this in the New Grove Dictionary of Musical Instruments, it's just flat out wrong. It proves that the academic system, at least in this part, needs, what Thomas Kuhn would say, a paradigm shift on its own. Okay, was enough for today. I think, well, the longest segment in the history of authentic sound. And I promise I will not cut anything out of that. There you have it. Other than when I shift screens, sometimes my computer refuses to do what I want. But other than that, you will have the entire video. And you do with it whatever you want. If there are people that go in the comment section here and say, look, Wim uses mean words and his voice is raising, how unacademic, and he is so ad hominem at Mr. Bonus, who is just a nice guy. And you know what? I think he is. It doesn't matter. We're not having a conversation here. I'm commenting on his comments on his work. And that cannot be hard enough. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for checking out our Patreon page. It's being updated and we're going to update it further. And if you do all of that, we see each other soon again.